It is 2 a.m. in New York, 7 in London, and 4 on a Tuesday afternoon here in Seoul. I'm Moon. This is ARIRANG, Korea's only global network. Let us begin this Tuesday afternoon with financial market jitters. It might be time to buckle up as Asian markets, including Korea's benchmark KOSPI, are bracing for heavy losses after stocks on Wall Street plunged more than 2% on Monday, the biggest fall since June, as worries over U.S. and global growth continues to mount. ARIRANG News Yoo starts us off.
Fresh concerns about the strength of the global economy on the back of weaker than expected data out of the United States and China sent stocks tumbling on Tuesday. Taking a cue from overnight losses on Wall Street, the Korean KOSPI closed below the 1900 mark, falling 1.7% to 1886. Japan's Nikkei 225 closed at its lowest level in 3 months, falling by over 4%, while MSCI's broadest index of Asia-Pacific shares outside of Japan fell 1.4%. U.S. stocks suffered their worst drop since June on Monday, with the Dow Jones Industrial Average tumbling 326 points, or 2.1%, to 15,372. The S&P 500 and the Nasdaq slumped 2.3% and 2.6% respectively. Monday's sell-off was sparked by data that showed new order growth in the U.S. manufacturing sector in January plunged by the most in 33 years, while spending on new construction projects barely rose from December. Experts say the U.S. economy has hit a soft patch.
We do know through the latter part of 2013, businesses seem to ramp up their inventories, perhaps a little bit more than they wanted to, so a lot of people were expecting that production would slow a little bit.
Stocks were also pressured by concern over China's economy, which saw service sector growth in January stutter to a 5-year low. And this is shaking the confidence of investors, who have their feet deep in U.S. stocks.
Most investors have about 80% of their equities in U.S. equities, and also have anywhere from 60 to 80% of their total portfolio in stock, which is far too concentrated.
With the U.S. Federal Reserve expected to further taper its massive stimulus program over the coming months, it looks like the market uncertainty is here to stay, at least for the time being. Yurian, ARIRANG News.
And like we just saw, global financial jitters are taking a toll on the Korean market as well. For a more in-depth look, we're joined live in the studio by Dr. Byoung-joo, the head of KL&P Consulting and our regular commentator on this program. Good afternoon to you, Dr. Kim.
Good afternoon.
So we just saw Korea's financial market going through turbulence. Now,
right.
First, the stock market. The benchmark KOSPI broke through the very key, psychologically important 1900 level. Now, how serious is this on the balance?
You know, those of us who are hoping for like a 2200 or 2300, KOSPI reaching those levels by sometime early this year, have been very much disappointed by this move right now that we are looking at right at this point. And as you mentioned, 1900 level was such an important psychological barrier. But the thing is, we have to keep in mind the long-term perspective. It doesn't have to be a really long-term perspective. But looking back just 1 year, let's bring up the graph here. It's not that bad. We have to be cool about this. Right at this point, the far right-hand side corner is where we are at this point. Just keep in mind what was happening around like a summertime last year. It was way down. So it's bad, but it's not that bad. So we should not lose our cool here and just have a longer-term view. And just, as you said, just buckle up a little bit. I don't know, that could be a little bit of a too strong expression, I suppose. I think we're doing fine at this point. I mean, the only reason that the only thing was that 1900 has remained such a important kind of psychological barrier that a lot of people have been talking about. But that 1900 point itself, by looking at this graph here, we will realize it's not so much of a big deal here.
Now, let's turn our focus to the currency market. Now, the Korean won approaching about 1,090 won against the U.S. dollar. Now, is this a bigger deal then?
Yeah, well, yes and no, I suppose. I mean, just like a 1900 mark for the KOSPI itself, 1,090 the won per dollar itself is an important mark, and it's another kind of psychological barrier here. And I don't think we're there yet. It's getting,
we're not there yet.
Yeah, we are getting
Right.
close to that. A lot of people are concerned whether we will get to see that or not. But the thing is, you know, once again, longer term view, let's bring up the picture here on the screen here and take a look at it. What is exactly happening? We will start with a more relatively shocking or relatively dramatic graph here, where peak was the highest, strongest point in the shorter term was 1,045 won per dollar back in December. And it has come down all the way to very close to 1,090 mark. That's where we stand and where we stood yesterday. But the thing is, let's move on to the next picture, and that will tell us better soothing relief or sense here. See, that's where we stand all the way to the right-hand side. And, you know, during the summer or late, I suppose, the summertime last year, we had really terrible time. So, well, then again, exporters always like a cheaper one, of course. But in terms of like a fluctuation, we had a terrifying time, you know, last year. So, as in terms of where we are standing here, it's not that bad. Same
right.
story.
Just to let our viewers know, the closing numbers today for the Korean won against the U.S. dollar was 1,082.5 won.
Okay, quite close to 1,090, I suppose.
Right, but you know, we're still okay
Yep.
in that spectrum. Now, should we say that even the most advanced economies are really now facing challenges?
I think Yurian just offered a very interesting and very comprehensive report here, and she was very thorough in terms of covering all the markets. I mean, she talked about the falls in the New York stock market as well as European markets. And today's what was happening in Japan, very considerable drop right there. And you know, thankfully, Chinese markets are closed because of the holidays. But Hang Seng Index was open. Hong Kong was experiencing quite a dramatic downturn as well. So this is indeed, to answer your question, you know, global phenomena, and especially even in the advanced markets. For a few days ago, a few weeks ago, we were all thinking that advanced market, stock market would be a safer place to put your stock in. But now it looks like it's not exactly the case at this point, and we need a few more trading days to come up with a firmer conclusion on that. But we do face all these major issues that Yurian just talked about, the concerns about China and the United States and elsewhere, even in the emerging markets. Indeed, you know, there seems to be no exception around the globe, other than what's called the frontier markets, where not much money has gone into, such as Nigeria, Pakistan, and Bangladesh. But I'm not sure whether you want to park your money there yet at this point. So it's quite global.
Right. I mean, we're just talking about investors taking their money out of emerging economies and then putting it back to, you know, the boring U.S. market and whatnot. However, we're just seeing that the Wall Street isn't faring too well either. So this really, indeed, like you said, is a global phenomenon.
Exactly.
Now, we're hearing about worries about a 3D perfect storm worldwide. Now, what is this?
3D. First D is downturn in China. You know, Yurian already talked about that. Overall, the weakness of manufacturing and also even weakness in service market, which could actually lead to below 8% growth, probably close to 7% growth this year, possibly in China. That scares a lot of people, especially in the emerging market where they've been selling their you know, natural resources to China. So that's a big concern. Another second D is deflation in Europe. We talked about this before, and overall their inflation rate has been remaining under 1% for the past about 4 months, and they really need a you know, upward bounce at this point rather than deflation in Europe, so that these countries can pay back their debt. Third D is emerging markets devaluation. Of course, they're not actively devaluating their currencies, but their currency valuations are heading down, starting with Argentina. But even it now looks like that the overall downturn seems to be reaching to the markets which used to be thought as relatively safer, such as Hungary and Poland. They are losing their currency value. So those are 3 Ds. And together with that, of course, U.S. QE tapering concern. So the overall picture doesn't look that good.
Now, in response to this, all the external or outside turmoil, we have been talking largely about Korea's very large foreign exchange reserves. Now, is it good enough to I suppose, rely on that now?
The thing is, foreign exchange reserve is very important factor indeed, and having a large size of that is a very important thing for Korea under our belt at this point. But however, As they discussed back in January 26, emergency meeting, the government is focusing on letting our facts known better in the global world so that the investors will have higher confidence in Korean market. That's essentially pretty much what we have in terms of the cards that we have. Some people are talking about the need for interest rate increase. However, interest increase, when money flows out, you need to increase your interest so that you can stop the money outflow. But the thing is, in Korea, we have household debt. So if interest rate goes up, they will be affected big time. So there's a big concern. And also, we are talking about deflation here as well. So looks like interest rate increase is not going to be an option. So with the transparency, openness of the policy making, as well as large size FX reserve are the ones that we have under our belt, it seems, at this point.
Well, all in all, however, the consensus or the conclusion seems to be, to me, that Korean financial markets right now is riding on the with the wave, global wave of, I suppose, turning downwards. But in the longer term, because of our fundamentals, the strong fundamentals, we should be able to, I suppose, rise from this momentum.
Yeah, I agree with that conclusion. As soon as the advanced markets calm down a little bit, I think Korean market will calm down as well.
All right, Dr. Kim Byoung-joo, thank you so much for today. We'll talk to you tomorrow.
Okay.
With rapid changes in the global economy, up-to-date business and financial news has never been more essential. See what's making markets tick around the globe. We speak to the experts and cover the biggest financial stories.
North Korea provocation.
Quite good. We received a lot of positive feedback, especially from those abroad.
Turning now to domestic politics, exactly 4 months from today on June 4th, Koreans will head to the polls to elect the new heads of local governments. It may seem like a long way away at the moment, but the rival parties have officially started their 4-month-long race to the line. Our political correspondent Kim Hyun-ji reports.
The pre-registration of candidates for the June 4th local elections began on Tuesday and will run until May 14th. The elections cover 17 provincial governor and mayoral seats, as well as positions for education superintendent and local assembly members. Those who choose to register during this period can carry out certain kinds of campaign activities, allowing voters to gain an early understanding of the candidates running in their region ahead of the main candidate registration period in mid-May. While busily contacting political heavyweights for the upcoming elections, the ruling Saenuri Party is trying to deflect the opposition's attempt to paint the elections as an early-term evaluation of the Park Geun-hye administration. Saenuri Party floor leader Choi Kyung-hwan has stressed the local elections are about picking the best leaders for local governments, and not about passing judgment on how the Park administration has done thus far. The main opposition Democratic Party leadership has issued a political reform plan in an apparent bid to get the upper hand in its competition against the dark horse of the opposition, independent lawmaker An Chol-soo, who generated excitement among voters with his plans to reform politics in 2012. The Democratic Party's political reform proposal centers around scrapping the privileges of lawmakers and includes having all lawmakers report to an independent ethics committee their plans for overseas travel and commemoration ceremonies for the publication of their books. An is aiming to launch his own party by March and field candidates for all 17 provincial governor and mayoral seats. With the addition of An's party, the June local elections are expected to be a three-way race for the first time in 16 years. The Democratic Party is leaving room for cooperation with An's party, saying the public wants the liberal opposition bloc to unite and win the June local elections to ring the bell on the conservative Park administration. But since it's not clear whether An will reciprocate, a major reshuffle of the opposition bloc seems inevitable. Kim Hyun-ji, ARIRANG News.
Meanwhile, President Park Geun-hye has ordered officials to keep the upcoming local elections in June clean. Speaking at a cabinet meeting earlier this Tuesday morning, President Park said as the June local elections are the first elections to be held during her administration, they must be, quote, fair and clean. The president ordered government ministries to make sure that the political neutrality of the elections is kept and added that she will penalize anyone involved in acts of corruption. She also asked the ministries to prepare prepare their status reports, which will start Wednesday and include practical measures for correcting irregularities in government reforming public institutions. The ruling party chairman Hwang Woo-yeol has called for measures to support small and medium-sized businesses and help them innovate. Now, marking the start of this month's parliamentary session, the Saenuri party chief addressed the full assembly as well as members of the cabinet. Hwang said his party will prioritize building the middle class with a focus on creating jobs in local and central governments and addressing the high youth unemployment rate in line with the president's 3-year economic innovation plan. Now, Hwang also called on the main opposition Democratic Party to support passage of a bill on North Korean human rights. It's often said that here in Korea, you have to be a superwoman to continue your career after getting married and having children, as childcare and housework are still seen as a woman's responsibility. But help is at its hand for women who want to juggle a career and their home life, thanks to a series of new government measures. ARIRANG's economics correspondent Hwang Ji-hae has the details.
The Korean government has unveiled a comprehensive plan aimed at making the nation's female workforce a new growth engine. Related ministries say to help ease the chronic problem of women giving up their careers after giving birth, new measures will be rolled out to allow their husbands share the burden of raising their family. That includes raising the paternity allowance for male workers by as much as 50%. The government also plans to operate and support a pool of substitute workers that can be inserted to companies understaffed due to workers going on paternal leave, and it will also expand the number of public nurseries. The government has also pledged to provide various vocational programs for women to make it easier for them to return to their careers. This comes as Korea's female employment rate sits at just 54%, much lower than the OECD average of 65%. The government believes that boosting the female employment rate is a crucial factor in achieving its ambitious goal of raising the overall employment rate to 70%. It added higher female participation in the labor force is also an essential way to raise the country's potential economic growth. The government will carry on with its plans during its weekly economy-related ministers' meeting. It will also make female employment the one of the main agendas of its 3-year economic innovation plan. Hwang Ji-hae, ARIRANG News.
The two Koreas will hold working-level talks tomorrow to set the date and location for a round of reunions of families separated by the Korean War. The meeting will take place on the North Korean side of the truce village of Panmunjom at 10 a.m. Korea time. Now, South Korea's Unification Ministry said the two sides will exchange lists of their Red Cross delegations through the Inter-Korean hotline before the end of the day. This comes after North Korea broke its week-long silence on Tuesday to propose that the Koreas meet for working-level talks on either Wednesday or Thursday. South Korea had previously proposed holding the reunions from February 17th to the 22nd at North Korea's Mount Kumgang Resort. Meanwhile, over in the U.S., in the state of Virginia, it has taken another step toward ensuring students learn about the Korean name East Sea, as well as the Japanese name Sea of Japan for the body of water between the two countries. The Virginia House Education Committee passed a bill Monday that requires school texts in the state to use both names. And Virginia State Governor Terry McAuliffe said Tuesday that he is willing to sign the bill once it passes the full assembly Thursday, where it is widely expected to win approval. Now, Korea argues the Japanese name for the sea reflects Japan's imperialistic aggressions. Back here in this country, cleanup of the Yeosu oil spill looks like it will be harder than expected. The oil has spread east from the original spill site in Jeollanam-do province to Gyeongsangnam-do province, where the oil slick is roughly 30 kilometers in diameter. Now, residents of both provinces say they're worried the pollution could lead to health problems and that it will have a major impact on the fisheries industry, and this is a primary source of income for many in that area. Now, the spill happened over the weekend when a tanker hit 3 underwater pipelines that cracked, spilling oil. The Yeosu Coast Guard blames the pilots on board the tanker for going over the recommended speed on approach in GS Caltex, the pipeline owner for not reporting the spill until 30 minutes after it occurred, which may have delayed cleanup efforts. Now, with the Sochi Winter Olympics just 4 days away, Russia is taking zero chance with security, stepping measures up to extraordinary levels. But experts warn Islamist extremists may be able to find a way through the ring of steel around the city. Connie Kim has this report.
With just a few days left until the torch is lit to signal the start of the Sochi Winter Olympics, security measures have been stepped up even further amid serious concerns Islamist elements within Russia's restive south could be plotting a terrorist attack. Experts point out terrorist elements may already be around the area, sitting like sleeper cells awaiting instructions. Citing a bomb attack at a stadium in the Chechen capital Grozny in 2004, a security expert says the bomb used then was embedded in a concrete pillar 3 months prior to its detonation. Ian Von Gordon, director of a protection training institute, says Sochi is bound to be a target as extremist Islamist groups in Russia's Caucasus region have vowed to launch an attack if the games go ahead in Sochi. He says it's highly likely people with ties to these groups have applied to work as contractors or employees for construction companies used to build Olympic facilities. Some 100,000 contractors are estimated to have been working at Olympic venues, working as bus drivers, or in sewer construction. Security may be the main concern, but it isn't the only thing making officials sweat despite the chilly temperatures, as much of the construction for athlete and media accommodation is still not completely finished. With a record $51 billion poured into the games by the Russian government, hotels still sit unfinished, buildings unnamed, and it's easy to spot people on ladders doing some last-minute fixing and drilling. Although the sports venues are ready to go, the eyes of the world will be fixed to see whether Russia, with little experience of hosting huge events, has what it takes to successfully host one of the world's premium sporting events. Connie Kim, ARIRANG News.
Well, here's a piece of alarming news on the health front. The World Health Organization says cancer is growing at an alarming pace worldwide, and new strategies are needed to prevent the disease. A report compiled by the WHO's International Agency for Research on Cancer predicts the number of new cases of cancer will rise by more than 50% over the next 16 years, from the 14 million recorded in 2012 to 22 million in 2030. The report was completed with the contributions of more than 250 scientists and released for World Cancer Day, which is today, February 4th. Now, the report estimates that at current rates, 1 in 5 men and 1 in 6 women worldwide will develop cancer before they are at the age of 75, while 1 in 8 men and 1 in 12 will die from that disease. In other news, the Korean government is calling on smartphone makers and local telecom carriers to address the surging number of applications that come pre-installed on mobile devices. Now, in order to cut down on the clutter, the mobile industry will soon have to give users the freedom to choose which apps they want to delete. Polly reports.
Today's newest smartphones boast more features and functions than ever before, but they're often weighed down by dozens of preloaded applications, many of which can't even be deleted. These default apps are typically pre-installed on smartphones by hardware manufacturers, mobile carriers, and sponsored software developers. But the Korean government says enough is enough. The Ministry of Science, ICT, and Future Planning recently announced new guidelines that take aim at the so-called digital bloatware, which they say takes up valuable space and hinders fair market competition. For example, the ministry found that a total of 80 default apps were installed on Samsung's Galaxy F smartphone released by SK Telecom. Under the new guidelines, companies such as Samsung and LG Electronics will be forced to cut more than half of their pre-installed apps. Officials say the move is the first of its kind among global communications regulators.
Users will have the option of whether to use pre-installed applications. In addition, we've laid out guidelines to ensure information is disclosed regarding these preloaded smartphone apps.
The measures, according to the ministry, are in response to the majority of people who are fed up with unwanted apps being forced upon them. In a survey of more than 1,000 smartphone users in Korea, 67% of respondents said they had tried to delete applications that came pre-installed on their mobile devices. In addition, more than half of those surveyed expressed complaints over the inability to delete these defaults. The regulatory guidelines will go into effect in April, but will only cover newly launched devices. The ministry added that it plans to continue talks with mobile industry leaders and also track the effectiveness of the new policies. Paul Yi, ARIRANG News.
And that brings us to the end of this newscast, but stay tuned to ARIRANG. We have a lot more coming your way on Early Edition at 6.